Hey, you already know the gist by now, but if you want to see part 1, link is in the description. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with everything in the series. Yeah, let's go right on into it. All the tracks are now mono tracks and they're all renamed. And the reason I made them mono is because all of these were mono sources to begin with. And as you can see, all my naming for all the tracks is short. Everything you can read right away. And some of the names you might not get right away, but I have a way of naming that makes sense to me, and you can do the same. Obviously, GTR stands for guitar. And the reason I do, like, let's take this, 2A and 2B. Let's take this, for example. 2A tells me that it's guitar 2 and it is mic A. And 2A and B, the reason I don't use like guitar 2 mic 1 or something like that, like they labeled right here, is because that's too many characters, and it's also using numbers to identify two different things, so it can get a little bit confusing because it's not guitar 21 and then 22. That doesn't make any sense, especially if you're doing playlists and stuff, which we can talk about later. Playlists don't really come into play when we're mixing if we're given set tracks, but when you're recording and editing, in Pro Tools especially, a playlist is another way to store a different take without having to create a new track like you have to do in Ableton, for example. But yeah, so guitar 2A and 2B tells me that it's the same guitar 2, but just two different mics on the source. And this is, I'm gonna organize this a little bit because right now it's throwing me off a little bit that snare is over here. That's snare top and snare bottom. Bring this back over here, and the way I organize tracks in my session is bottom up, and it's also the way I mix, which some people don't do it this way, but personally for me, it makes the most sense mixing this way. I like seeing, it's the same way I do live sound too. I like starting with drums and then going to bass. Room is the drum room mic. This is overhead left and overhead right. Got snare top, snare bottom, kick A and kick B. Still haven't listened yet to know which is which. I'm assuming kick A is kick in and kick B is kick out, but not sure. We'll have to figure that out. I may ask him because he didn't give us information to begin with. But all right, bass here. Got guitar 1A, guitar 1B. Great. Guitar 2A, 2B. This is guitar riff A and B, so these are both the same, and this is the guitar intro A, guitar intro B, gib. And then I have my main vocal here, and then the main vocal double. Then we got the oohs, and then the ooh harm. Cool. So this is now organized, but it's not colored yet. So in another part of track organization that's really helpful, and I didn't really get into this until later, but like looking at this right now, if you scroll up, I have no idea what tracks are below. I have absolutely no idea. And you can scroll down and read and find your track and get along that way, but it's so much more helpful having tracks colored, and each engineer does it differently. I personally, if you click here, down here on the track color, if you double click, it'll pull up the track color menu. I personally have saturation here with brightness low, so it's not super bright, but it's also pretty full in color. Drums for me, drums are purple. Drums, purple was my favorite color, still is one of my favorite colors, and drums are one of my favorite instruments. So having drums be purple makes the most sense to me. I'm gonna pan these right now. This is overhead left and right. These are gonna be hard panned. I think I said this earlier, but maybe not. The one restriction I had with recording was that we we have an overhead left and an overhead right if we were doing drums. And the reason for that is unless you're recording Motown or like funk or anything like, I don't know, 70s and earlier, maybe 60s and earlier, having just a mono overhead, I mean, if you're doing hip hop too, I guess that's okay. So a lot of hip hop is kick, snare, hi-hat, you know, and that's mostly happening in the center. Unless you're doing one of those genres, it doesn't really make sense to just do a mono overhead, especially if you want a big drum sound when you're mixing. And I mean, at the end of the day, all your sounds that you're getting, it's so important to get those from the early stages, or at least push those in the right direction, because no matter what I do here, if I have not the greatest sound to start with, it's not going to sound way better at the end unless I replace things, which is not really fun, personally. Okay, so purple's drums. Bass is brown for me, and the reason why bass is brown is because bass, it tends to be muddy, you know? So I want to make bass not muddy, so to remind myself that bass should not be muddy, I have the track brown. Guitars are my current favorite color, which is kind of this forest green, and guitars are my favorite. I'm a guitar player, I guess primarily, so I like seeing my favorite color be guitar, you know? And then I tend to have the guitar variants, so this is the riff, be a similar green but not quite the same. So we'll do that, and the intro can also be a kind of a different color. And already you can see that when you look up, you know this is drums, you know that this one's bass, and you know that these are the guitars and these are the important guitars. For vocals, the color that catches my eye the most is red. And the reason I have vocal as red is because when you're mixing a session, vocals are the most important, even if it doesn't really matter what genre you're in. Vocal to some extent is, I mean, to every extent is very important. I don't care if you're in a hardcore punk band and you can barely hear the vocal, or if you're in shoegaze and you're not really hearing the vocal, it's still important. I mean, the listener is relating to the vocal on some level, and getting that sound right, even if it's hidden in the mix, is very important. And that's why I have vocal as red. And I mean, you know, if you're working on a pop project, it's what you're going to be focusing on mostly. And a lot of pop mixers mix top down, starting with the vocal and then going beyond there. Personally, it doesn't really work for me if the drums aren't hitting right. I'm not going to get a good mix with the vocals. I'm not going to be able to focus on anything else. So I like working on the drums first and then bringing everything in, making it good, and then I'm happy. So yeah, okay, cool. Tracks are organized, looking good. You know, let's give this thing a listen. I have no idea what this sounds like, so let's hear how it is. I'm gonna start from the top.
What did Tom's kids think the moment they were told that their dad was strung out in the sky? Did they ever hate him? Did they fall down to their knees and cry? God, give me a permanent love and a God, give me a sign that you're there, and that my sins never get old.
That was part 3. Part 4 coming out soon. Subscribe down below. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff to stay up to date with the next episode. Yeah, thanks for watching.